Good day to you, Guyana, and welcome to another edition of Facing the Nation. Actually, I think this would be, yes, this is the final October edition of Facing the Nation. I'm Malika Ramsey. Thank you so very much for joining me today. We're going to have a bit of a dip. We're going to do something that we have not done in a very long time today, for the first time in maybe 2 years or so on this program. As you know, originally Facing the Nation would have been a call-in program, and because we went wider than politics, we started dealing with a number of issues. We decided to put a pause on the phone lines. But today we're going to open the phone lines again because we're dealing with two topical issues. The first has to do with housing, and as you know, recently it would have been in the news that the Sophia residents, they were up in arms, and they felt a bit unsafe and so on regarding what is happening in terms of their homes, the demolition process and so on. But I'm not going to say too much on that because I have a guest who is quite capable of talking about what is happening. He's not representing the government. He's here representing the people today. He's quite capable of talking about what is happening with those residents as it relates to housing and so on. I see we're beginning to get calls already, but we're going to have the discussion first and then we're going to call. Those of you who've been following this program for years, you know my rules when it comes to the telephone lines. When you're going to call, turn the volumes of your television sets down. Stick to the topic at hand. I would want you to focus and concentrate only on housing issues because he's here to talk about that in terms of as a representative of the people. If you call and ask about GCOM chairman and any other thing, and if you call in abusive tone or abusive manner and you're disrespectful, we are going to be forced to disconnect you without warning. So those are the rules, but before we open the phone lines, I'm going to give you the rules again. But for now, it is my pleasure to welcome back to Facing the Nation Mr. Akeem Peter, and he is an APNU AFC councillor. Welcome, Akeem.
Thank you for having me again, Malika.
All right, great. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. And viewers, I could let the cat out of the bag, basically on a short notice. But again, this is an important issue. Also, Akeem and I will be talking also about what is happening in the Georgetown City Council as it relates to the parking meter negotiations and other matters that he may want to bring to the fore, because he's not a person who works in one area or is only knowledgeable on one area. He can give you information, and I'm always pro-youth. He's a young man with most of the information, and he'll be able to give you that today. But let's get right to it. Also coming up in the second half of the program, you'll get some information on the Department of the Environment, because the last Conversations in State, of course, aired on NCN. That would have been last Saturday. We focused on the Department of the Environment as I had us sit down with the head of the Department of the Environment. But for now, let's talk to Akeem. And first off, I wanted to begin by talking about those Sophia squatters, Akeem. We read a lot in the newspapers and we saw a lot on television. What is happening as we speak? Where are negotiations, and how are the people in Sophia, the Sophia residents, going to benefit?
Firstly, let me say, Malika, off the bat, and this has been communicated to the squatters. Squatting is illegal. And the residents on the reserves, the zero tolerance zones, they quite understand that squatting is illegal. But at the same time, even though squatting is illegal, we still have a obligation to the people to make provisions for them, even though they're in an illegal state. So negotiations between the people, myself, and the government, we're at the point of there would not be any more demolitions until a viable alternative is found.
What is a viable alternative?
It may be finding house lots for them or finding housing, low-income housing for those residents in a not well-developed, but a developed, regularized community, so that we can then move forward to develop those reserves.
Will the people, if they're not willing to, I'm wondering if you and your team maybe are skillful enough to get them to move, because the complaint is always this, and I had this conversation with a colleague a few days ago. The complaint is always this: look, whether this administration or the previous administration, there would have been alternatives for them. Some squatters tell you plain, look, we don't want to move, we don't want to go too far out of town, so on. Are you prepared to deal with that sort of resistance? I mean, it is their right, but are you prepared to deal with that sort of resistance that you may get from the residents?
One of the first things we did, Malika, when the issue of squatting came up in Sophia and in Constituency 5, one of the things we did first off the bat is to hold a general community meeting with all the squatters, everyone from A Field, came out, from B field came out, even onto E field in Sophia. And we also took a documentation of all those persons who were on the reserve. And we said to them, listen, when these alternatives are found, and we know for a fact that your government hears about you, so when these alternatives are found, you must cooperate, because it makes no sense you fight against the government, and it makes no sense you fight against yourself. Because in strength there is unity, and I believe that because they were united on this issue, they got the results they needed, and their homes weren't demolished in the time that was issued in the letter. Okay. Right? So they've all committed to moving when that alternative is found.
When the alternative is found.
Yes.
Have you been able to get information from the Department of Housing, Central Planning and Housing Authority, as to what timeline you're probably looking at for the alternative measures to be put toward these residents?
Well, the minister recently issued a statement a couple of days ago, Minister of Housing, and she said January 1st?
Yes.
Or 31st. One out of those
January
days.
2018.
2018, yeah. So what was communicated to us is that from now onto January, or onto the first quarter of 2018, the solutions will be had, and the solutions will be communicated to the residents so that they can start preparing themselves for removal. And one of the things we wanted it to be a smooth transition from the life of a squatter to a life of a regularized resident. Yeah. So what's going to happen in some cases, we may not even have to break their homes. They themselves will demolish the buildings and remove from the community, and that is the progress we need to see happening.
And it may actually benefit some of them, because you never know what pieces, what material, and so on they can probably take elsewhere, especially if they're not going into homes, so to speak. Viewers, again, on the issue of housing and anything as it relates to City Council and City Hall, I'm going to the phone lines are now open. You can call, but once again, let me take this opportunity to remind you of the rules. When you're coming through, turn the volumes of your television sets down. Akeem Peter will only be answering questions either on City Council, those matters in Georgetown as it relates to housing and in terms of squatting. He's a representative of the people today, not a representative of the government. So ensure that your questions are relevant to him. Again, do not call and ask about the crime rate or ask about GCO. I'm not saying that those matters are not important, but today's discussion, in this point in time, we are focusing on those squatting issues and housing matters and so on as it relates to him representing the people. Akeem, I'm not sure, of course, as a councillor representing one of the constituencies in Sophia, I am not sure how far your reach is, but someone was asking a question about squatters other parts of the country. For example, she gave a specific area. I think it was the Tugville area. Do you have any idea of what is going to happen there? Because it not only affects the squatters of themselves, but the residents who are regularized continue to complain. And again, we're not trying to put anybody out of a proper living, but do you have any idea how movement in terms of regularization will come eventually?
Yeah, Malika, to regularize the community, there are certain steps and certain things that needs to be in place. One of those things, a regularized community, squatting isn't an apparent ingredient then. So we understand clearly that squatting is illegal. That's the policy throughout the country. The ministry, as I'm aware of, they have a lot of mechanisms in place to deal with squatting, not only in Sophia, mind you, but throughout the country. And they have persons on the ground doing their assessments, because the residents who are regularized already, like you rightfully said, complain a lot about the squatting, and to the extent of them saying their property value. Their properties are devalued because of the ingredient of squatting within these communities. And that is something we are looking at from the local level, which is the Mayor and City Council, and also from the Central Housing and Planning Authority.
Yes. All right, let's take this call. Caller, welcome to Facing the
Hello,
Nation.
good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
This is Facing the Nation?
Yes, it is, sir.
Oh, I have a problem here, man.
Go ahead.
I put in for a house about 3 years now, right? And I didn't get any reply answer today. But I live on the West Coast.
Yes.
You know the plastic city where they call Jetty?
Yes.
when I living on a dam, right? I squatted.
Okay.
So I want to know what's going to be my position.
And you applied 3 years ago?
Pardon me?
How long ago you said you applied? Sorry, I missed that.
3 years ago.
3 years ago.
Yes.
All right. Okay, sir. Listen for a response. Akeem, again, even though you're not here to represent government, what can you possibly say to, and he's not in Georgetown, but we serve the entire country. What would you want to say to him at this time? Because he did indicate that, look, he is squatting and we need to have him regularized. What are your thoughts?
What I would first off the bat suggest to the caller Malika is for him to go into housing and for them to give him a direct update. Because the first thing is they're supposed to send an acknowledgement letter saying, listen, we've received your application and it's being processed. If he hasn't received that letter, I think he should first of all go down into housing and find out where his application at and at what stage his application is at. And also, to be quite honest, just as he was, tell them you're squatting. Here is where I am.
Yes.
And I have the willingness to move, but these are the things that I lack. And one of those, the residents themselves, even in Sophia, they said, listen, we understand that we're wrong. We understand that we've been here, some of them 25 years, right? 10 children on a reserve squatting, right? We understand that. But in order for us to move, we need certain things from you. Well, when they say from you, they mean from the government. And it is up to us to try to see how best we can facilitate those needs and to get them regularized in a proper community.
Okay. All right. One of the other things I want to talk about, as we're on the note of squatting, of course, but let's go back to the phone lines before I pose that question. Caller?
It's me again. Sorry, right?
That's all right.
But I just want to correct. I just listened to that guy spoke to us, all right? But listen, I'm 60 years of age. I used to run city council.
Oh.
Right, but where I going to build a house right now? I'm squatting for 3 years. And 3 years I put in for the house flat, and I haven't got any reply. Several times, and they said nothing yet, nothing yet, nothing. They got telling me no acknowledged form, nothing.
Okay. All right. Okay, caller.
Okay.
We're going to see you. Again, this poses a great challenge indeed. I mean, you know, yes, he has indicated that he's 60 years old. I can recall months ago there was, and I think there is to some extent, because I know people who experience the same thing. There is to some extent still a backlog.
Correct.
But, sir, I can tell you it is not a case where the Central Planning and Housing Authority is sitting on their hands and doing nothing. But again, another difficulty, another challenge has been posed here where he is not, and this is not knocking people who are older, because I always say age is wisdom. But it poses another challenge. You have to think about the situation of a bank. Bank is not necessarily going to give a 60-year-old, a loan, because they have to protect their own interests. I don't know what's your take on this, Akeem.
And that is why the Ministry, Central Housing and Planning Authority, have taken a position, because they're backlogged, and backlogged to the extent of 6 years ago, 7 years ago, coming forward now. It means that everyone who have applied before or are applying now, they would not have a response until when. That is why they have created certain initiatives such as low-income housing, so that they would sell these homes, not necessarily on an entire lot, but the homes will be, let's say, 2 homes on 1 lot. That's going to, for example, my good friend that called just now, he's 60.
Yes.
He can be facilitated with such an initiative. Again, so instead of processing an entire land for him, he may be able to qualify for a low-income house.
And again, I know he's probably still listening. It comes back to what you said earlier. Sir, we know it's very difficult, and this is to viewers in general. It's very difficult to take time out of your day to go here and to go there. But indeed, you would have to go in.
Correct.
You did say to him, go in and be honest. Let them know what is happening and what your situation is, and they'll probably be able to facilitate. Of course, okay, while we're waiting on some other callers, one of the things that people are complaining about, and this here brings in your hat as a city council working in mayor, as a city councillor working in mayor and city council, they talk about in some areas the squatters, them contributing to flooding. Well, of course, when it rains, there is you're flooding on government reserves, and you're probably blocking drains and canals, and there's nowhere for water to go. Is this something specifically that the council can look into?
Let me first deal with Sophia, since I'm the councillor for that constituency, and I have a more intimate understanding of squatting in the area. The residents don't block or don't cause, well, they don't block the flow of water. What happens is that they squat on the reserve that the machines are supposed to run on to clean the the drains. So what happens is a ripple effect. Because you're there, the drains cannot be cleaned efficiently. And that is one of the things we spoke about with the residents, because it brings into bear the normal or the regularized residents of that community to a disadvantage. That when rain falls, because of your presence on the reserve, we're flooded. And that is something that we're looking at as the mayor and city council, how we can deal with it. And that is why when it comes to city planning, squatting is such an important, well, not important, but it's an important factor to look at. And to not have in your community, because once you squat, that's government land, and that's a purpose for the government land being there, and most times it's to facilitate the clearance or the desilting of a canal or a drain.
Okay, all right. Viewers, if you're now tuning in, of course, this is Facing the Nation. Today we are talking with APNU AFC Councillor Akeem Peter. Even though he's an APNU AFC Councillor, he's here today as a representative of the people. We are talking about, well, we initially began our discussion by talking about what's happening with Sophia squatters. He is knowledgeable enough to talk about squatters in general in Guyana, and of course we'll be talking about some of the matters happening in City Council. Again, those of you who are now joining us, we also decided to open up our phone lines today, and we see we're getting another call. But remember the rules: turn the volumes of your television sets down, be respectful, stick to the topic, and of course we'll have a pleasant conversation. Good day to you, caller.
Good day, good day.
You have to turn the volume down, please.
Okay. Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. I live on the Sophia squatting zone. I applied since 2007, but the paper passed in 2008, right?
Yes.
And everything was sure. But I left my dam so long, right, that in PP government, right?
Yes.
They had I drove fasting, and they come and give me some paper about the land and everything, right? So we move and things. So I was waiting for them to move, right?
Okay.
I was waiting for them to call me and give me this paper. I did out since 2008, waiting for them to locate me. I don't do everything. I even train boss, get everything. I don't work in small, so I just want to live in land and like that and let them in the place, right? I don't, you understand? They don't locate me, a piece of land to be wherever they give me it. This is every time I go there, right? I just do it any way they give me. And I walk in, I don't walk in, I could do my own thing, I know to do my little thing myself, you know. All they have to do is giving me a little piece of place, and I got my way. But I don't over 10 years now with the system, you know. 10 years now with the system, waiting for the same thing, the man that would keep their tree and get it fast, but I don't work land since 2007, 2017 and 2018. And I just mentioned, they tell me I got moved. I just went to buy it down with the black top there. They tell me I got moved, I got 3 little children here, I got 3 children.
Okay.
I got that time to go to come and see me, and me can't go to school, kind of frustrated, you know.
Okay.
And I think, you know, I did it breadwinner, and I tried to know, they could talk to me all, you know, we got to know what's going on. But that paper showing them, I got 2 papers, one for the white implied since 2007, and they gave me 2008 paper. And then I got another paper showing it 2013, the government come in to me and tell me and move me from me and they give you outstart and everything, and we see some now another government coming forward now. And the next time we got moved just like that, you know, give me days without giving nothing this fast for the people, but then just because the time I got trained, look at to school. You know what I mean? It's the only citation, you know? And it's that, you know what I mean? And this will be, we just want to satisfy to get moving and everything, get to do whatever they want to do. We go to clean the place up like what I want to do, till they're ready for me, but it seems like a van come along, tell you they got moved, and this person, I don't mean it's a whole citation, setting there, and just taking out your old focus, you know, you're not going to work like that, I don't get work.
I understand, caller. But I can tell you, just listen to Akeem, and he'll tell you again, he'll remind you, just in case you didn't hear before, what the plan really is. Akeem, how can you respond to this caller?
Firstly, let me say, like the caller echoed, or is echoing the sentiments of a lot of residents within the Sophia area that is squatting on the reserve currently. What I would want to tell the caller, we are considering, and we have considered, the fact that it's in the Christmas season, first of all, and the fact that they're residents or they're human beings living on those reserves. Thirdly, we've taken a position, unless there's a viable alternative found, persons would not be removed from the government reserves just like that, in a harsh manner. We would not approach the situation.
So they need not worry.
So they need not worry at this point. Moving forward, what we have asked them to do is to keep your surroundings clean, environmental wise. Even though we are facilitating you there now until we come up with solutions to properly remove you and to relocate you, it is your responsibility to take care of your surroundings. For example, if the drain is dirty or the canal is dirty in front of you, it is your responsibility to clean that. Until such a time, those alternatives are found and it's communicated to you where you have to go.
So they have no fear. They will not be bulldozed off of the land.
Precisely.
Again, you say viable alternatives. I know you don't have a crystal ball and you're not working with Central Housing Planning Authority. Have you been given an idea or a hint as to whether, because we coming back to the first caller who talked about the fact that he's 60 years old and he's applied so long, and now for him to go looking for finances and so on to build will be a problem. Have you gotten a hint as to whether these people, some of them, especially those squatting in Sophia, if they will be given lands, or if, because we have the government's condo complexes and apartment complexes and so on. I know some were built in Perseverance. We had the Building Expo, where those were put on display. Have you gotten a hint as to whether government will go that way for the folks in Sophia, or if it would be lands?
I would assume that it would be a combination of both.
Okay.
Some persons who, and it all comes back to the economical stability of the residents. Some of them can afford the land and they pay in installments because they choose to build.
Yep.
The younger folks may be able to get a loan from the bank, etc., etc. And the older folks may want something just to go into. And I know for a fact the Central Housing and Planning Authority, they are currently running through some schematics on how to, the fastest, most efficient way to remove the squatters. And most of it is low-income housing, low-income buildings, and identifying where those buildings will go. If you're going to do a huge apartment building and you relocate them as per field or as per area, all those things are on the table. My team and we have made suggestions to CHMPA along that line, doing huge apartment buildings and including each apartment you give to the residents and they pay you, and over time the apartment becomes theirs.
So it's like you're paying in installments.
Precisely.
They seemed like they would go for that idea.
And that idea was birthed out of community meetings with the very squatters.
And they suggested
that, listen, even if you give us a small apartment, because most of the houses, they aren't huge. Right, they're just small rooms. So if you give us something to mirror that in a more structured manner,
survive.
We will survive, and we will even be more willing to move.
Okay, caller, welcome.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon,
both of you. What I want to say to both of you is that if the government build these houses, where these people, that man just now said to you that he's 60 years, and he had 3 years, he had applied for a house lot. Where he's going to find 4 or 5 million, and a lot of them in Sophia, where are they going to find 4 and 5 million to buy a house? Give the people the lot, let them move their wood, but the minister and the government saying that they want shocks. But the people ain't got money. So therefore, they have to use what they have. No use, it's like the Lane Avenue. I was in the scheme years ago. I grew up at Lane Avenue. Government had built this, maybe Burnham time, whoever time. They had built ranges. And those people used to pay a rent. And after so many years, I was big when they started to sell those ranges. And the same people bought it. So things like that we have to do for the people in Sophia. They can't find $4 or $5 million.
Indeed,
caller. Exactly what was
and I think
buy lunch, not to buy food to put on the table. Where they can find $5 million?
We hear you, and to interject here.
Let me talk. Completely out of it. The bank is not lending you no money.
Caller.
You got a lot of documents. You have to have a lot of whatever to prove to the bank that you could pay back.
Caller, but this is the point. But this is the point. You have
the government is saying that, oh, we can buy the house and we can get this. Yeah, but what if people trying to buy?
Caller, this is why I'm trying to get you to listen to the point that Akeem made earlier, where he talked about. All right, Akeem, I want you to repeat where you talked about people paying in installments and eventually being able to own.
The thing is, Malika, we have a thorough understanding of the economical state of the residents and the squatters, not only in Sophia, but countrywide.
Yes, she did mention. She talked about what happened in Lincoln before.
Like I said, I do believe the approach of CHMPA would be a combination of providing homes to those who, like the caller said, cannot afford to build out of pocket or can't get a loan from the bank, and or those who are in the system for how many years they're provided house lots. With that, the concern of CHMPA, they don't want a transference of a shantytown into a new community. So the approach that they wanted to take is to have a structured settlement, and where it would not be shacks, but rather modernized low-income buildings.
Exactly.
And that is why I mentioned the fact that we have suggested, and this came out of the squatters themselves, that if we provide apartment buildings for them, they would be able to pay a rent, or this building would, this room or apartment will be leased to them, and as they pay, let's say the next 5 or the next 6 years, that apartment becomes theirs.
Exactly.
Right.
And right, that is what we're trying to get you to understand. Viewers, we understand, and to that particular caller, we know we are young people, so we know what is happening with banks in terms of the struggle, how difficult it is to acquire a loan. So we're not sitting here just talking off the top of our heads. And this is why I always tell people it is important for us to stick on the ground and understand what the people are feeling. We understand what you're talking about, and that's why I'm saying I am happy that you brought up the point that there is a structure that will eventually be put in place, and you said this, the squatters themselves proposed this, whereby you can pay in installments and eventually own the property. So there's not one option on the table. You don't have only one option of getting the land, acquiring the land, and then going to the bank, and maybe possibly being disappointed. Caller, welcome to Facing the Nation.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
And good afternoon to Ms. Dan.
Good afternoon, sir.
I'm thinking that the squatting situation country is ridiculous. Squatters need to remove from the squatting phase and the squatting the simple fact that it is making the place too dirty. So many years where the one going to squat, they can't put on no storage, they can't got no blood.
Health issue.
You know what I mean? And this same water and these things that they're going to squat around, got to be used for the citizens in the country themselves consuming it. So the end of the day, they need to move from the squatting areas, especially to those main areas where the citizens' health is threatened. You can't have squatters along those places. Thank you.
Thank you very much, caller. Thank you. He raised a good point indeed, and again, for those of you who are currently squatting and you're looking at the program, we're talking about finding solutions, alternative solutions.
Yes,
so we're not attacking you. But the caller made a very good point that we haven't even discussed, the health issues that's coming from it. You don't have proper drainage in terms of coming from your homes. What is your sewage system? And again, you are putting your own self in danger.
And again, Malika, we understand the situation of squatting, and we also understand the health implications that come with such a lifestyle. But there are other factors to consider, and yes, there are certain areas that are zero tolerance, certain activities that won't be endorsed, period. For example, you mentioned the sewage system. And that is one concern the CHMPA raised for the reason of, or the push to eradicate squatting as early as possible. But at the same time, with that push, they want to provide a viable alternative for those people before they're removed. The squatters themselves, and this is something I've said over and over, as a people, we have a responsibility first to ourselves and then to our neighbors. So as to we have to understand that whatever we do, will have an impact on them, whether positively or negatively. So we've been doing a lot of community meetings and outreaches so as to teach people what is right. You have to keep your surroundings clean because of the mere fact it's not you alone living in this community, and in addition to that, it's beneficial to you as a person. So we have several forces at work. CHMP, they're doing their part. My team, we're doing our part so as to educate the squatters, and the squatters themselves now must do their part. One of our leaders of this country once said the most important persons in any country or any democracy are the persons beneath. And a lot of times the persons beneath are those who live on the fringes of life. And for example, the squatters. So we must have an ear for them, and we must take care of them, because I mean not that they're our people as for government, but solely and wholly because they're Guyanese.